G'day everyone and welcome to the GameDay Squad Aussie Rules Fantasy Show. I'm Pitty and alongside Haz, we are the Fantasy Bros. We've partnered with GameDay Squad to bring you everything you need to know to succeed in GDS Aussie Rules this season. And to help me preview a big round 7, I'll be joined by Bales from the AFL Fantasy Fanatics. Bales, how you going, mate? And thanks for joining the live show.
Yeah, good, mate. Thanks for having me on for another one. Clearly, I wasn't bad enough that you said, nah, we're not going to get Bales on again. So glad to get the invite again. So thanks for having me on. Didn't have a great week in GDS last week, but still going pretty well in the season rankings.
Nah, it's good to hear, mate. No, we love having you on. We love your insights. Always going to get you back. You know that. And yeah, I didn't have a great week either. So we're going to move through that section pretty quick when we get to it. But again, just for all our viewers and listeners, as always, just make sure you're subscribed to all our Fantasy Bros socials so that you don't miss a thing this season. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, Facebook, and Insta. And just make sure you search at Fantasy Bros AU. If you're a new coach, it's not too late to get started in GameDay Squad. I know there's a few other platforms I'm on where my team is absolutely cactus. So come jump on GameDay Squad because it resets every week. You can clear your squad and go again. Just simply download the app or visit the GameDay Squad website, create an account, and use that promo code there on screen, FBAR26, and you'll get 3 9-player common packs just for doing so. Now, Bales, we did allude to it. We've got to quickly touch on it, the elephant in the room. And if you're in the chat, let us know as well. How did you go this week? Because I know I struggled. Bales, kick us off, mate. How did you go if we look back around the grounds?
Yeah, so not too great in classic. So 68th for the week. Still 4th for the season, so still very happy where the squad is at the moment. Probably could have been 2nd or even maybe 3rd if it wasn't for such a poor week. But unfortunately, the Bont absolute stinker was the big reason why that happened. I was thinking honestly about taking him out and putting in Zach Merritt. Fun enough, which is a huge disappointment there. But yeah, like the best finish was shout out to the obviously your Fantasy Bros, the Sunday Showdown, 18th for the week. So pretty good, top 20 in that for the week, which was nice. It was disappointing though. I came first in the Fantasy Bros Sunday Showdown. Was it 3 weeks ago? And that was the week that it got that didn't count the Monday scores, and they said, "Oh, we're just going to scrap this week." And I was like, "God damn it!" I was like, I came first. I thought I qualified for the Fantasy Bros playoffs at the end of the year, but unfortunately, I've got a few more chance to do that there. So, did you want to go through my star and my like the awards now, or do you want to go through your weeks first, and then we'll do that?
Oh, I could think of nothing worse than going through our weeks. I'll hit on it really quickly. My best finish was 20th in under 22s and an absolute stinker everywhere else. I was out in the nosebleeds there with yourself, mate. But unfortunately, I didn't hold rank as well as you did. I have slipped in my rankings, which sucks. I can't stand it. I'm hoping to bounce back this week. Would have been lovely to hold rank. And as you can see there for Haz, his best finish as well. What was that there? 37th in 22s. And he said that it was his by far his worst round of GDS AFL since joining last season. And I think I can join him in saying that there myself. So bit of a common theme there. Get in the chat. How'd your week go? Did you have a better week than us? Did you play some of those pods? Or not even pods, really. It's those players that hit that ceiling score. We can see there. Arnie Booger's in the chat. G'day, Arnie Booger. Big Cats fan, Baz Lover, and Jez. Yeah, what a game Jez had, kicking 10 snags there against the Dogs. But yeah, go on, Bales. Hit us with your start and your scar. Who was it?
Yeah, so the scar, I think I already alluded to him a little bit before, right? But Bont, like 28, like I know that he got a little bit banged up in that game. The Dogs, it was a horror night for him, right? But well, actually, no, it was 28 in like the other formats. Well, I can't remember exactly what his score was in GDS, but it wouldn't have been much better than 28, put that way. It would have been like low 30s, and I had a gold, so that would have been even worse. So that wasn't great. So what was his score? Do you have it there? What was his actual score last week?
Yeah, 36. 36.
Yeah, so not great. Yeah,
not 36. Not 36 disposals. 36 GDS
which
points.
is like when's Bont ever done that? So it's really disappointing. But I reckon the star of last week, I reckon I'll give that to. I reckon like Baz and Dacos are probably the easy one, so I want to give it to someone else. I'll go Brody Grundy. I'll go the Ruck Pig. He's been good the last 3 weeks, going well over I think 140 in 3 weeks in a row, and I've had a bit of salary on him those couple weeks. It's been really good to have the Ruck Pig there, so I'll give it to him as someone a little bit different.
Yeah, so consistent. I love that pick. He's been so good for us as well, and I think there's nothing better like seeing Brodie Grundy run around, at his absolute best, which we love seeing. And yeah, another comment in there as well, just around Ocean Mullen too, and how well he played, and he's clearly the best shutdown player in the game with his tagging ability. And we might have a talk later about who he could be going to
I
this week,
wonder who that
and
could
the
be.
job he's yeah, I know, and the job he's done on him in the past, but. I just didn't think that Bont was that targetable and that gettable, but he just didn't even look in the game. He looked out of sorts. There were a few shots where they panned to him in the game, and he just looked like a completely different person in his face. So I just, yeah, that was one that really stung, I think, a lot of squads. And there's a couple other scars we've got there as well. Zach Bailey has said that his Platt Bontempelli dropped off for his team score, but it really means that he had to then eat the Zach Bailey score in the forward line. And I think there are a few other poor scores around in that forward line in particular. Like we had Freo, Josh Tracy put up a 53 from memory, which a few coaches were keen on, and he didn't go very well. So it just meant with Bont dropping off, we had some pretty poor scores going around. And Tom Stewart was one for me, mate. I sort of was picking him based off the matchup, and I was backing him in to bounce back from a poor week against West Coast had gathered around the week before. I thought the matchup was there, and I thought there was enough points to go around in that back line. But a couple problems were that the ball didn't get back there enough, first of all. And really, it was your Lawson Humphreys and your Zach Guthrie's who pushed higher up the ground to sort of chop the ball off early. And it meant that your Tom Stewart and, Connor O'Sullivan, for example, and, they were sitting back behind even deeper. And yeah, he really struggled in that game, and that absolutely torched me. I should have probably not picked him, but
Oh,
I did. I backed the matchup, and I got
I
absolutely
was going to
burned.
say the matchup against the Dogs, a good matchup for defenders, as you know. You would have thought Geelong up by so much, there would have a bit of chip sort of getting those plus
Yeah,
sevens and
yeah.
racking up at the towards the end, but just didn't happen. But just quickly before we move on, just on that one, in the Stats Lab primetime matchup, I came 25th of the week, and I just remembered I had Bont in that matchup platinum, and I had Sam Darcy platinum. So
Mm.
I was having one drop off,
Oh,
but then the other one counted, and I just wonder where I would have finished if it wasn't for having that injury. So I
yeah.
just sort of wonder. But anyway, that's what happens if you have a bad week. You wonder what could have been. But hopefully we go a bit better this week.
Yeah, fingers crossed, mate. I hope you bounce back. I hope I bounce back. Hope has bounces back, and I hope everyone else bounces back. Are you in the cup, by the way? Are you still in?
Yes, I believe I am, which is good. So I was, actually no, I'm not sure if I am. I'm not sure. Can't remember if I got an email or not. I have to check that. I don't know if there's a way to check that. I was waiting for the email, but I got the email for the IPL, the Indian cricket one, but I didn't get
Yeah.
one for. I got one on Monday saying I
I
won
th-
in the cricket one, but not any game as well. But normally you get an email if you
yeah,
won
I
or you
think
lost. You get one regardless, but I'm not sure.
yeah, I haven't even checked mine, mate, because I was knocked out. I know the email came later in the week, I think, if it's come out already. But yeah, I got absolutely smashed in my matchup there. Shout out to Jive Turkeys, great coach. He's through to the next round, and Sloth King's knocked out Has, mate. So we got our All-Star cards. We got excited. We went a bit risky, and we got bailed out in the next week. So not great for us around. But yeah, hopefully you did get through. That would be unreal.
Yeah, I'll have a look while we're talking.
Absolutely. Our stars are on screen. I won't talk too much about them. They do what they do every single week. But that Platt Sheasel really helped me put a half decent score together and hold whatever rank still remains. But yeah, shout out to Dill in the chat as well. G'day, Dill, the third fantasy bro for Aussie Rules. He's still sitting third, I think, in starter. So he's having a great season, and he played Tom Stewart following our advice. So yeah, he wasn't too happy with that score either. But however, we move on and we fight another week. So we'll kick on and have a look at those round 7 fixtures there, Bales. We'll check that out. So in terms of our primetime comp this week, those primetime games, we have 2 games. For that, 4 teams we can be picking from. So we have the Dogs and the Swans on Thursday night, which is shaping up to be a really interesting game from a fantasy perspective. And on the Friday night, Anzac Eve, we have the Tigers up against the Demons at the MCG in a blockbuster game. On the Saturday fixtures, we have 4 games there. So we've got the Hawks up against the Suns. We have the Bombers up against the Magpies in that traditional Anzac Day clash. We have the Power up against the Cats, and we also have the Dockers up against the Blues over in the West. In terms of Fantasy Bros Sunday Showdown, we have 3 games there, 6 teams to choose from. We have the Saints up against the Eagles, another fantasy relevant game there. We have the Lions up against your boys there, mate, the Crows. That's here at the Gabba. And we have the Giants up against the Kangaroos to round it out. So, again, some very interesting or relevant players to be picking in that Sunday showdown. But my midfield's looking very interesting, that's for sure. Have you got any thoughts initially around those fixtures as we head into round 7, mate?
No, not too many thoughts. I am liking that Sunday slate particularly for GDS. There's some really sort of juicy matchups there, particularly those Saints and Giants boys there. So I think those 4 defenders have been a lot there. So yeah, no, I think it's looking good and looking forward to a big round of footy. Like the Anzac round is always probably my favourite round of the year. Not only because my birthday's on Anzac Day, which is perfect for someone that loves footy like me, but just obviously being such a special day and a special round. It's always good to get goosebumps with the last post. So looking forward to watching all that and hopefully our GDS players scoring some points.
Absolutely, mate. And speaking of those defenders, as you did, let's launch in and start previewing who we've got to choose from this round in round 7 and who we like. And I'll preface a couple of things first, just before we get kicked off, mate. But the first thing I want to mention is that you can see we've got 3 options listed for our round 7. So that's Roberts, Wilkie, and Short. We like all 3 of those this week, and Wilkie's probably forced his way into the 3 options we want to talk about. We had him as a player we're going to talk about last week, but I think he's one now that we have to at least have a conversation about in terms of a genuine option for round 7 and probably just moving forward. You could also throw Josh Dacos as an option and a Dan Houston as well. We might have a conversation about the Pies boys there and what your thoughts are, mate. But before we get into talking about those options, if we look at the plug and plays, we've got Sinclair, Ash, Whitfield, and Nazaio Angani-Millera. We saw a slight role change in the second half last week for Lockie Ash. He went more in through the midfield. This week comes up against North Melbourne. And we know North Melbourne last year, he got tagged out of that game by Jacob Constanti, who he's not in the side at the moment. But because it's happened in the past, it hasn't been a great matchup for him. Are you concerned about his selection in your squad at all this week, or have you put him in as always?
I think I put him in as always. And funny enough, we were saying about the 4 guys on the Sunday. They're all the plug and plays, which I think works out well. So I just think they're like Ash. If he gets some attention, let's say Constanti does come in, or they use maybe someone else to go to him, like they have shown they can pull the trigger in the midfield, right? And you sort of wonder, like, I was sort of interested to see that switch happen. I think maybe might have been 3 years ago or something like that he did actually play a bit of midfield time, and he was actually going to people and tagging them. So it'd be interesting to see if was just an experiment because they were down by a little bit, or if it was just, or maybe it's something they want to look at a little bit more because I think the guys are mentioning on our pod on Sunday that their midfield is a little bit vanilla. Like it's a bit sort of like, it's a little bit like it runs with the Crows, like what it's been like. So Oliver, Rouston, like there's not a lot of speed in there. So maybe they're just trying to inject something different. So just something to watch. But I think we'll plug him in this week.
Yeah, I agree with you there for sure. Something definitely keep an eye on. But I mean, they've been relying on Toby Green pretty heavily. Like if Finn Callahan was sort of getting shut down a little bit in that game last week by James Jordan. So it probably was that context of the game, wanting to get somebody else in there to give them a different look. And yeah, I think that's just something to keep an eye on, but good to get your insights there on that as well, mate. And before we start talking about those 3 options on the screen, in terms of a Josh Dacos and a Dan Houston, I found them really hard to sort of get right each week. You know, Dan Houston last week put a massive third quarter together to finish on a 128 after he wasn't tracking that well at halftime. And a Josh Dacos probably didn't finish the game or hasn't scored as well as what we thought he might recently. His first 3 games to the year have been incredible. He scored 171, 118 and 142. And then since then he's gone 189 and 112. Tom and Ground's much the same, and I think the role is still there, but he's just not scoring like we have. He put up a 143, though, last year against the Bombers in this same game. Are you keen on a Josh Dacos this week or potentially a Dan Houston?
Yeah, I've got Josh Dacos still in there. I know he's had a couple of tough matches. It's funny that if people remember back to that game against GWS when he copped that really big hit in the first quarter, he came out and he ended up like going well over 110 in essentially 3 quarters. Like it was pretty incredible how he scored in that game. But since then, his scores have been low. I think probably a bit of circumstances like Brisbane at the Gabba, tough matchup, got stuck on the bench towards the end of the game. Freo in the wet. And then who did Collingwood have last week? I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Carlton. He would have had he scored over 100, right? But he gave that free kick away. which is that minus
Yeah.
2 in GDS? I'm pretty sure it's minus 2.
Yeah,
Yeah,
minus
minus
two.
2. So that
Yep.
hurts a little bit towards the end when he was still tracking for a good score. But I think it was okay last week, much better than the previous couple of weeks. And Houston racked up in that last quarter. I think there will be a bit of chipping around. I don't currently have him in my squad, but he's someone that if there was an extra spot in defence, he's probably the one that would be in there. So he may come in, but at the moment he's not quite in there at the moment. I've got a couple other options just ahead.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I'm probably very similar, mate. I don't have him in there. I've got him in A squad. I want a piece of him somewhere. But yeah, I think there's a lot of options in defence that we can talk about. So those on screen, I think Archie Roberts, what a player he has been. He's forced his way into our squads as well,
So good.
given his recent form and the role he's playing there for the Bombers. Yeah, he's clearly, their main distributor down there. He's averaging 129.5 points for the season in GameDay Squad. So that sees him as the fourth highest scoring defender, which is incredible. And since moving back to that halfback flank, like he's completely changed how the Bombers look and play back there. He's had, scores of 100, 166, 199, 145 for a 4-round average of 152.5. Like he has really forced coaches' hands into playing him in those standard competitions. And now he comes up against probably one of the best matchups in the game. Like it's the third easiest matchup for defenders this week in the Pies. We saw what Nick Newman did last week in a half, and I'll put this out there now. That is the last time I ever pump someone up at half time, because I think after that halfway point of the Thursday night game, my whole round went downhill. So I apologise to the footy gods for ever, pumping up a pick of mine. I'll never do that again. I've learnt my lesson. But if he can do that in a half, like Archie Roberts could have another really good game this weekend.
Yeah. Oh, I think this is probably I'd almost put him in the plug and plays this week. I think you got to chuck him in there. Collingwood's such a good matchup for defenders as well. It's funny, like you feel like Roberts is one of the probably top 10 most useful assets on GDS at the moment, because you can put him in every comp. He's also in the under 22 comps as well. So I think he's such a useful asset. I actually had to buy gold off the trade market this afternoon because I was missing one and I wanted to put him in one of my squads. So I've ended up getting enough transfer market. So I'll just plug him in. He's very, very good option this week. Put some salary on as well if you're in the classic and up comps as well.
Yeah, for sure. And we got Ganners in the chat there. G'day Ganners. He says, love the Blakey shout. We'll get to chat about him in a moment. Absolutely. A bit of a pod this week up against the Bulldogs there at Marvel. And then feels Jacos deserves a shout, or at least a mention there. We did just have a chat about him there, Ganners. We really like him as an option this week. And yeah, we can fit 3 options there on screen. There's obviously more. So we did give Jacos a bit of a shout out there too. But mate, Cal Wilkie, is he a genuine option we can look at in our standard competitions now? Is he in the same vein as Roberts? Has he kind of forced his way into coaches having to consider him each week?
I think he has to, right? Like he's always been a great player, right? And I'm pretty sure he has averaged over 90 GDS points in the past for a full season, but I don't know if we expected him to do this, right? The beautiful thing is, like, and I'm sure, Pitty, you're probably the same, watching your player, you see them run to the bench and you go, oh, here we go. Now the next 5 minutes is just going to be seeing the time tick over, and you just hope there's a lot of like boundary throw-ins and stoppages and that, and then they come on. It's only 2 minutes of the game's passed. But the good thing with Cal Wilkie is he never comes off. He's played 100% game time in every game so far this season. I believe has he turned up, I reckon, in every game of GDS this season? Yeah, he has. Yeah, 109 being his lowest score. So, like, I don't have him in there at the moment, but based on his form, he should be one of the first picked at the moment. But West Coast isn't necessarily a great matchup for defenders. In like previously, it's probably like back end of neutral to hard matchup. So he's not. Is he there for you? Like, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he is there for me, and definitely in a couple comps, because I just really think that it's his time on ground for me, 100% time on ground. You're never going to see him sort of, well, we say that now, but we know what's going to happen if we come out and say that. But yeah, you just don't really see him on the bench, and he's been taking like around 10 marks a game. So I think that this is one where, yes, the matchup data may not be there, but I didn't really like him last week against Adelaide, and he came out and did that. I thought he might have had to defend a bit more than what he would, but he's just such a good defender. Like he easily beat, it was particularly Tex there at one stage, and he was just doing really, really well. So I think that he's someone that I have got in my squad. And again, he's got a ceiling too. So he's got that really good floor, but he's got a ceiling at the same time, putting up those really big scores. I found it hard picking a 7 defenders because there's probably more that I like this week. So I'm trying to spread a few of them across the sides. In terms of that matchup, though, I said that last week too. Eagles, they're not a great matchup, so I wasn't really keen on a Jordan Clark or a Luke Ryan. And I even told Roscoe last week, I was like, mate, nah, Luke Ryan, don't go near him. Like, it's not a great matchup. Hasn't scored well on him in the past. And then look what he did. He had a 110, and that was looking a lot better at halftime, I think, from memory. And Jordan Clark had 143, and that was off the back of 11 marks. So I think if we look at that matchup data, yes, it's not amazing, but we do need to recognize that teams have scored well on them very recently. And I think if there's another team I could back in to score well against the Eagles, it's probably the Saints, because they do have that chip game about them, and Cal Wickley likes to get involved. So I am pretty keen on him this week.
100%.
Now, mate, Jaden Short, I'm sure he'd be in one of your squads too, you reckon?
Yeah, he's in my main squad. Yeah, for Classic. I'm pretty keen on Jaden Short this week. He's probably the only Richmond player I've got a bit of confidence in putting up a good score week to week. His market share is extremely high, and I think it's just going to continue. I thought the start of the year, because I do look a little bit at market share stuff, like not a huge amount, but every now and again with some players, and Short's been one that he's had, I think, above 8% market share, which is like well into the elite category, like some of the best players in the comp. And just with his role, I think he's going to continue to have a high market share, and he's going to be able to put up good scores week on week. But I think the thing I'm looking at more this week is, I thought, well, Collingwood have been the best matchup for halfback so far this year. But over the past 5 rounds, there is 2 better matchups than Collingwood at the moment. And one of them is Melbourne. They're giving up plus 11 points, which would be in GDS. I'm using the Mare's Magic one for the DVP, which would be probably plus 15 points maybe in GDS, with obviously the extra point for kick. So I'm looking at the matchup going, I think it's a good matchup. So as long as, I don't know what the weather's like in Melbourne on Friday night, but as long as it's not wet, I'm pretty keen to play Jaden Short this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke about that market share, mate, but they have obviously Sam Banks went down last week, unfortunately, with a collarbone too. So he's one that they do like the ball in the hands of as well. So he won't be there. I think Luke Trainer as well. He got injured in the twos, I think, last week from memory. So he's going to be.
Did I read that he's good to go potentially, Trainer, this week after?
He's cleared.
I'm not sure, but was he? I can't remember if he was dropped last week or managed or injured or something like that. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, no, neither am I. But if he comes in, it'd be interesting. But I'm still going to back him in, like that market share, particularly with Banks out. Like you said, that's just such a good reason to pick him. And last week, again, talking about that matchup and how good the Ds are, we saw Darcy Wilmot put up 125, but it was also, your Jasper Fletcher, who was around 100. It was Kitty Coleman, who was a tick under at 95. There's points to go around, and if somebody has the bulk of the market share like a Jaden Short does, I just think I'm pretty keen to lock and load him into a side as well. So I'll have him in a few of mine, which is good, and hopefully he can put up a nice score for us back there too. Before we jump into a couple of those pods there, who we also really like, we've got Arnie Booger in the chat, has dropped in that comment there. Dropped Jacobs this week. Thoughts on Jordan Clark? He had that big pop score last week against the Eagles. Would you be keen on a Jordan Clark this week, mate?
I don't think so. And the only reason I say that is because Jordan Clark and Luke Ryan, particularly those two, but I just don't trust Freo as a fantasy scoring side. They're a good side, and they're going to be, I think, probably are in around the top 4, and they're going to be playing finals, I'd imagine. But I only really trust, probably on a week-to-week basis, probably Murphy Reid at the moment in the forward line, and depending on when Darcy's in or out, Luke Jackson. It's just that I felt the midfielders, particularly, and defenders that, like being Sarong, Brayshaw, Clark, and Ryan, they all have their ups and downs. Like they can just drop a low score out of nowhere. Like we saw Brayshaw had a stinker last week as well. I think Sarong had a stinker a couple weeks ago as well. I think Luke Ryan had a big one last week, but then the week before he was like really quiet. So it's like they're just too up and down. So Clark's probably the one you could go out of the 4, but I don't know. Freo just worry me a bit. They just don't score enough GDS points, I don't think, as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. I will say, Jordan Clark is probably the most consistent. So if you're going to pick a Freo defender from this game, Arnie Booger, I'd be going to Jordan Clark for sure, especially if you want to target that matchup. But yeah, 100%, mate, I agree with you. I find them so hard to read. I can't pick them. And we're going to talk about midfielders soon. And to me, I'm like, I want to pick a Freo mid. I don't know who to pick. especially with Hayden Young coming back in, who sort of changes that dynamic in there. So I think for me, it's just one that I'm going, I don't really want to get this one wrong, even though there's such a good score potentially on the other side. So yeah, Clark, maybe for your consistency he's shown this year, he's the one. But yeah, I think there's probably a lot of really good matchups elsewhere this week that I'm keen to chase. And speaking of those good matchups there, it's probably those two pods, Blakey up against the Bulldogs there at Marvel, and we've obviously got Tom McCarthy there as well against the Saints. Both two really good matchups there for both of those players. Again, they're points of difference for a reason. So they're not going to be super highly played in standard competitions amongst all GDS coaches. But if you are keen to go in a different way, these players could be doing it. Like the Lizard, he's averaging 100 GDS points for the season. And that's despite his highest score of the season last week against the Giants. In that Battle of the Bridge, he had 146 in a man of the match performance. And he's taken 15 kick-ins over the past 2 weeks while playing 100% game time, a bit like that conversation around Cal Wilkie. So in terms of the Bulldogs, who, they're giving up the most GDS points to opposition defenders this season. And I talked how Lawson Humphreys had 130 last week. He was our primetime pod last week. I should have played him in a standard comp. I would have been better than most of the other picks I had down there. And Zach Guthrie, 113. So I think that Nick Blakey is shaping as a really good option this week. 120, 111, and 95 in his last 3 against the Bulldogs. What are your thoughts there on a Nick Blakey, mate?
Yeah, the Lizard, he's pretty good, isn't he? It's Cal or Tom, if you're watching, please add DPP to GDS because I'd be playing like 3 defenders in my midfield this week. It's there's so many good defenders. I think it's such a tough week to put a pod in because I just like so many other options. Like you've got the 4 that are there in the plug and plays. You add Roberts as well, and I've got Short. It's one spot, and I've got Josh Dacos in that spot at the moment as well. So it's like that's 7 already. But like Blakey on any normal week against the Dogs is a great matchup, and he's definitely in my primetime squad for sure. And then on the other hand, Tom McCarthy has got another great matchup against the Saints, and he's playing at half back again after the sort of experiment they used in the midfield didn't work. He's at back at half back, but again, how can you fit them in? He's on the Sunday game, so he's in the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown. So Blakey, I really do like this week. If you want to go pod, 100%. I love both these 2 picks.
Yeah, for sure. We got Arnie Booger there, that comment. So Melbourne and Maggies, who is the other good team for defender matchups? It's St Kilda. So you've got Western Bulldogs. They are the best matchup for opposition defenders. So that's who Nick Blakey's coming up against. You've got Collingwood as the second best, Saints as the third, Demons as the fourth. So some really good matchups there. And the Bombers come in at 5th too. So, that's your Josh Dacos and Dan Houston, for example. So a lot of the players that we're really sort of picking most weeks, they've all got really good matchups this week, and some juicy pods are now into the conversation. So it makes it really tricky to pick a bit of a back line there. And just sort of touching on too from your Tom McCarthy, I think he's one that you could definitely look at as well for your standard comps this week as a bit of a pod, and definitely for that Sunday showdown, just giving up points everywhere. Hey, like we had Wayne Miller 139 last week and Worrell 131. There's just points everywhere. So I think that he's never faced the Saints before as well. Obviously, he was that number 1 mid-season recruit last year, and since then he's come in and he's had that market share of the footy down there. Probably the only Eagle I reckon you'd be confident picking in a standard competition at all, I would say. So he's one that you could definitely be looking at this week if you were keen, or if you had a bit of a card with higher salary that you want to rip out in a challenger, for example, or maybe a classic if you're dipping your toes in there for the first time. Definitely look at that for sure. And we got Janeth there in the chat there too. G'day, Janeth. Do you think Ash in the midfield holds? We did have a bit of a discussion about that earlier, mate. And the consensus is we're probably not too sure. It's something that we're going to have to watch. Bales, if you had to lean one way or the other, midfield role stays, midfield role goes, where would you lean?
I'd probably lean towards, I think he'll keep the defensive role. I think he'll stuff halfback. That's where he's been so good for a couple of years. But it's just something to, I guess, note moving forward that it could be something that does get changed maybe mid-game. Maybe he does play midfield. Who knows? Maybe they are looking for different. Maybe because they've got Lockie Whitfield back there, and they've also got guys like Himmelberg, Iden, like Fonte actually out this week probably means that it won't happen this week. It means he will be at defence. But maybe when Fonte's back the week after, just for future weeks, maybe do they go? We've got a couple of guys back there, so just something to keep an eye on. But I think he'll be in defence this week. You?
Yeah, I agree. I think he's defence, and I think it'll be a context sort of thing. I think a bit like last week, if the game's not going on their terms, they're not winning that midfield battle, or they need another look in there, I think Ash could go back in for sure. But I just it's hard to get a complete read on just yet, having only seen half a game of it and that change happening halfway through the game. It'd be different with Colby, for example, where that role change for Colby happened at the start of last week going into the game, and then they ended up playing really well and they won. You'd be more confident that he's not going to have that defensive role this week. I find with Ash getting that role change halfway through a game, I think he'll probably stay in the back line and they might look to explore it if that game's not going their way potentially. So something to wait and see in terms of that. And mate, just to watch Josh Worrell there in terms of one to avoid, just in terms of the matchup purely is what we're sort of looking at there, mate. Like he's been great to start the year and we think he's probably the best defender there. For the All Boys, he's been an absolute star, but the Lions are just not a great matchup for those opposition defenders. They allow about 74.6 GDS points on average to opposition defenders. And, last week we saw for the Ds, it was Daniel Turner with 93 points. In Gather Round, we had Luke Parker and Colby. They went 107 and 94 each. There's, haven't been some big scores on those Lions defenders, and we know they're going to be quite tricky. So he's just one we're thinking we could potentially not be looking at this week with so many other good options going around.
Yeah, I unfortunately have to agree. I'd love to say Josh Roll's a great pick, but unfortunately, just a matchup, a bit tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we'll jump into those midfielders as well, and we'll keep moving too. So as you can see there, for our midfielders, we've got our plug and plays, Dacos, Bont, Smith, Holmes, Dawson. There's an asterisk next to Dawson, and there probably should be now an asterisk next to Marcus Bont and Pelly. We'll have a quick chat about those two, because they're obviously probably not our plug and plays for this week, so to speak, but we're more so speaking just in general. Week to week, if we're picking a side, we can be confident with what they're doing, but we'll have a chat about them in a sec. Our three options for round 7, we've got Zachy Merritt, Sam Walsh, and Jack Steele. We did have Isaac Heaney there, and I messaged you before we came on here, mate. That threw a bit of a spanner in the works.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I was not expecting that. I had
no
idea
in there.
that
He was in my squad. Yeah, I had to change it. So.
He was one of the ones I was most confident on going into this week. So, yeah, for someone like me coming off a horrid week, that is not what I need. I need confidence in my picks. So we'll see what that presents. But in terms of Jordan Dawson, I haven't sort of kept up with what that talk is, mate. Is he looking like not playing again this week potentially, or what's the go there? Have you heard much about
that? No, I haven't really heard too much. It's just obviously with tragic stuff that happened last week. It's just really probably a day-to-day thing, right? I don't think he trained was on Tuesday when they had their main session. So like they pretty much said if he comes back, like he'll probably play because he's not injured or anything like that. So it's just pretty much a wait and see, right? Like I partly don't expect him to play this week. Like maybe next week into Showdown. But if he's there, if he's playing this week, I still think he's a good option because of the lack of midfield depth this week. Like we were talking before, we're not confident in maybe 5 or 6 midfielders, let alone the 7 we've got to pick. So like those last couple of spots are really interesting. So if Dawson was to play, I think he'd be probably put straight in there even though the matchup's a bit trickier. But just wait and see. But Bont's the interesting one.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you said you're potentially not looking at playing a Bont, and I haven't had him in my squads so far when building them. Obviously, when Isaac Heaney came out, that's where I went, do I just throw a Bont in and for a bit of that confidence, as much confidence as I can have. But obviously, the story is he had that really poor score last week. He's absolutely knocked around from last week's game, and he was sore. There were talks that the Bulldogs weren't going to risk it this week, so he must be right if he's playing. I'm just not confident that it's going to be a great score. I don't like playing a player when they've done that last week and they're coming into a tough matchup against another great tagger in James Jordan. Is that your thinking there about that? Mate, he might cop a bit of a tag this week and just not complete confidence in how he's going?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm not going to play Bont this week. There's just too many flags going there. Like there's the tag from Jordan that'll probably go his way. He obviously had a small hyperextension in the knee last week, so it's sore. That's what they were saying, that they said they're going to give. He's named, but they said they're going to give him every chance up until the game starts. So that just worries me that he's still going to be playing a little bit hampered there. Probably rules out a ceiling score unless he's going to do like a Michael Jordan flu game and go absolutely nuts. Which if anyone is going to do that, Bont's probably the guy that could do that. But I feel like people could get trapped a little bit because, as you said, Heaney being out, people go, who's the name at the top that I don't have in the squad that's going to play? And Bont's probably the first name that comes when I was looking through, came to mind. And I was like, I still don't want to play him. So I am looking elsewhere this one. I'm just a bit worried. Because Sydney's a hard matchup regardless anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably just the Bont factor that had me thinking about maybe we just put him in. But I do agree with you, mate. It's probably one that we should, yeah, potentially look at because I don't want to get into the weekend and then it comes out late that he's actually a late out and I've got to scramble at the last minute. That's not fun at all. So yeah, I think he's not going to be there. I'll probably throw him in one squad, just as a not a pod so to speak, but just hopefully if he does go well, I can sort of catch that score. And it's one of those comps where I might have a few pods in there. But yeah, I think in my main comps I'm going to try and avoid him if I can and pick some other players. So in terms of those other players, we've got Zach Merritt there on screen, as we said, Sam Walsh, and then we have Jack Steele too. I'm pretty confident in what Zach Merritt and Jack Steele can do. They've been locked into my sides, particularly after what Zach Merritt did last week. Shout out to Roscoe. He was really, really keen and locked Zach Merritt into his squad. I liked what Zach Merritt could do, and I was happy to pick him if I had a couple other players that didn't quite, get up, or if they were laid out, for example, or if there was a bit more carnage. I just felt like other players were going to give me a ceiling score, and they didn't. And then he puts up a 177. So it's hard not to go against him. And his role is interesting, though. He took a few kick-ins at the end of last week, and his CBAs have been down under 50% in the past 2 weeks. Are you concerned by his role at all in terms of that? Like, I know we're still going to lock him in and play him, but what do you think about that role?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It's a little bit of a question mark with Zach Merritt's role. I think he's still going to get to his score probably regardless of what role he plays. He went to half back because Jordan Ridley had a bit of, well, had a cut. They said calf tightness, but then they said it was a small calf strain. So he went into defence and just quietly stole a lot of kick-ins off of Archie Roberts, which we don't
Yeah.
like to see in GDS when you've got Roberts and you don't have Merritt. If you got both, it's fine. Like Roscoe would have been fine. He probably had both Roberts and Merritt. So it's like, cool, whoever takes a kick in,
Yeah.
as long as they're fine, it's fine. But yeah, Merritt for me, regardless of role, I think he's in for me. And I was annoyed last week. I was like, Bont's going to get tagged. Didn't like him. I like Merritt. And I was like, Merritt or Sarong, and I went Sarong. But I should have been Merritt or Bont and gone Merritt. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But Merritt's in there for me. And as you said, Jack Steele, good matchup against the Tigers this week. He's low score last week. I think he just got to the ton, if I'm not mistaken,
100.
last week. So, yeah, got 100. So, I think better matchup this week against the Tigers. I think he goes well.
Yeah, exactly. And he's had 112, 114, and 147 on them in the last 3, and he's looked so good there at midfield. And clearly, their best midfielder outside of Cozzy as well. I think Cozzy's more of that. Yes, he's a midfielder, but he's that dynamic push forward sort of midfielder that hits the scoreboard. I think Jack Steele's like your traditional midfielder. So I'm pretty keen on locking him into my squads.
I was going to say just because like Cozzy, we'll touch him in the forward line, but he actually isn't the forward stoppage guy. He actually is a pure on ball. Like I watched him really closely against Essendon. I brought him in other formats, and I've had him in GDS all season. So I've always kept a pretty close eye on who I've got. He's pure midfield centre bounce. Like he starts centre bounce and he roams around like where the ball is. Like he's not. Last year it was very much like you said, CBA then goes forward, whereas this year it's actually pure midfield. So, but I think Steele and him are the clear 1A, 1B. Like they're the two ones there. So Steele, you can definitely lock in.
Exactly. I've got him. Zach Merritt as well. He's had 124, 140, and 143 in his last 3 against the Pies.
He loves Day. Yeah.
He does, yeah. So it's such a good player like that. I think he's a lock in your squad. And again, it's probably a conversation of, how much salary you're going to put on him. We've got Arnie Booger's got a comment there, scared to field Darcy Parish. So yes, our 2 points of difference. We picked out Darcy Parish and Will Ashcroft. Arnie Booger, I'm scared to field Parish as well. And in fact, I'm scared to field anyone this week after the week I've had last week. But we thought we'd give a bit of a shout out to Darcy Parish, given the recent form that he's in. And also given the fact that it's Anzac Day. And we know that he does love a big game. He seems to play well in those big games. And he's had 131 and 119 his last 2. More importantly, the thing I like about Darcy Parish is that he's gone from that third banana in the midfield to the number 1. So he's had 81% CBAs at the weekend from 82% time on ground, and that's been consistent across the past 2 weeks. And again, Collingwood are a pretty good matchup for Parish across the course of his career. Like that's his 4th best matchup. Now, granted, he hasn't played them since 2024, and that was actually in the Anzac Day game where he had 130 GDS points. So I think that, if you want a bit of an out there pod, given the carnage in the midfield and you're keen to throw a bit of a dart, I think you could do worse than a Darcy Parish.
You could. I don't know. I lost faith with him in GDS a couple of weeks ago. I traded him in other formats, and I go, I'm just not on Darcy Parish. And then he, back-to-back weeks, he goes, bang, bang. Merritt's obviously not in the midfield as much at the moment. He's sort of roaming around everywhere, perhaps wherever he wants. I feel like maybe he's better at playing the Nick Martin type role from last year, where he starts half forward, roams to the midfield,
Yeah,
goes half
maybe.
back, and maybe that's a bit of a watch. Just on my watch sheet a bit closer this week. But Parrish, I don't know if I can get around it. If he was in the Thursday, Friday, so the prime time slot, or the Sunday for the obviously the showdown match comp, I might have been interested. But
Yep.
yeah, probably not for me this week. But Pod, nonetheless, he's been good.
Yeah, and probably depends where you are too in your journey in Game Day Squad and what your card collection looks like too. So I think that we'd flag that anyway. But yeah, I'm look, it is a pod, but I am a bit scared after last week to be playing them in a comp that I'm prioritising. That's for sure. But Will Ashcroft there on screen, he's our other one that we definitely are a lot more confident in, and he's found his way into one of my squads and potentially more as well, given some recent news. Got Roscoe in the chat there as well. So g'day Roscoe, mate. He actually said that Wash is a huge pod. They've spoken about that on their pod. And yeah, I think that he's one that could go quite large. So if we look at Will Ashcroft as a bit of a pod there, mate, he's clearly got that midfield stake in Brisbane in terms of their on-ball brigade. We've got Klug, who's still building up his tog. I thought he might have gotten a bit more of a bump than what he did last week. He sort of hovered around that 50-ish% again last week. And Dunkley's just a bit out of form too. So I think that if we're looking at targeting this Adelaide matchup, they're pretty good for opposition mids to score against. We've had Sarongo 145 on them, Brayshaw 120, obviously Baslenka 173. We had Hugo Garcia as well for the Saints last week, go 108. So there's been scores going around. And he's got an average of 117.5 GS points as well in his last two against the Crows. I think he's a pretty good pick. I like the fact it's back at the Gabba too. So I think Will Ashcroft.
I don't. Not as a Crows fan. I don't. I would much rather be Adelaide. I think I've had enough Adelaide over games for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I like the Will Ashcroft play. Like for me, I don't know if you've got any of these players, right? When you don't have them, you hate watching them. And Will Ashcroft is someone I hate watching if I don't own, because he gets so many little short 15-meter kick plus sevens that he then kicks away. He just gets like a couple of little like tackles where he'll just jump on top and he'll get the tackle at it. But hey, when you got him, it's absolutely fantastic. We love it. And I've got him this week. So I'm gonna love seeing it enough as long as the Crows win. But I'm sort of not quite sure how we'll go there. But yeah, I like Ashcroft as a pick this week. As you said, McCluggage still working his way back. He did bump, I think, 56% in round 5. Then it's got 67% here against Melbourne. So I think mid-70s is probably where he'll end up this week. And the Crows won't tag. So I like Will Ashcroft this week. He's one there. I don't hate Lockie Neal either. He's had a pretty good record against the Crows in his career. So if you want another real pod, he could be one. But I probably like Will Ashcroft there. But I've got both in the Sunday Showdown. So
yeah, so do I. Lockie Neal's been in a really good form to start the year too. If you go look at his scoring, he's done really well. So you can definitely look at him. The thing with Will Ashcroft too, I love watching him, even if I don't have him in a squad, just because he's probably my favourite player there for the Lions. And being a Lions fan, mate, he's so good when he's up and about. But the only thing that concerns me with Will Ashcroft, like I'll play him somewhere, maybe a couple comps, obviously 22s. The only thing I don't like is that he's still got that flaw in his game. Like he still can put up a sub 100 score if he just doesn't feel like he's in the game. So I'd love to see that get out. I'd love to see him be really hungry every single week. But I do have a bit of feeling that this week as well against Adelaide, who are a good side, your boys are a good mob, I think he'll be up and about for sure as well. And obviously a Zach Butters there, he's our fade. Arnie Booger had that in the chat. They mentioned, is it a Zach Butters, who we alluded to earlier? And yes, it is a Zach Butters. Oisha Mullen, all right, he will likely go and spend some time next to Zach Butters and get reacquainted. They've met a few times in the past. Do you remember what some of his scores are, mate? Recently against
they're both sub 60, put it that way. And I think one was a sub, would have been mid 40s, I would imagine.
Yeah, the 40, 56, and 31 in his last three against
I think the 31.
Cats.
I think the 31 was in a final when you got injured, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of years ago. But still, like it's not great. Like it's got on the screen one to avoid there, and I know it's the template obviously you boys use for the shows, right? But if you could just even edit this one to avoid and put whatever you want to do, like it's the biggest avoid of the year, like biggest fade of the year, if you want to call it that. Like I've got like in champion, for context, I've got a few cards that I'll fill out a champion comp just to see if I can get a pack or two there. I'm putting people like Marcus Windhager in my midfield in my team over Zach Butters this week, which is probably saying something.
Big
like
call.
I'm not wanting to play Zach Butters. I hope he can get to an okay score still, just to show that he can work through this tag. But Mullins had the number on him, and I don't want any part of it. I can't see him going over a ton this week, put it that way.
No, neither can I. And if you actually look at his scoring too, like how closely Mullen follows his opponent, like Bolt last week, he just strangles them, at the contest and out around the ground too. He had 4, 6, and 4 kicks respectively in those 3 games we spoke about. That's Zach Butters, and he's had 1 single mark across the 3. So Mullen's just on another level when it comes to tagging, and it's not something I'm going to muck around with this week. And funny enough, Zach Butters, he's the 5th most popular midfielder in standard comps this week, sitting at 30.6%, and Bontempelli is the 3rd most selected at 33.5%. We've also got Isaac Heaney, who's the 8th most popular, 25%. He's obviously now out too. So it's shaping as a really interesting week for mids. We've obviously got Dacos, Smith, Holmes, Merritt. There's a few names there. Jack Steele sitting at 9. We've sort of alluded to Freo and what we think about their midfielders there. So Caleb Sarong, he's the 7th most popular. And a Sam Walsh will round out the top 10 in terms of who coaches are liking this week. And I know we haven't spoken about a Sam Walsh yet, but in terms of your thinking, mate, why would you be interested in a Sam Walsh this week in your squads?
Yeah, I think in a week like this where we're struggling with a few options besides obviously the couple that we've mentioned, where you're probably looking at maybe 1, 2, 3 to fill out your midfield if you're not confident. I think Walsh is a good one. So like Freo, I think Freo are fairly, like, they're okay, like they're neutral for matchups here. Like looking at the DVP, so Fremantle, like they're slightly negative there, so they're probably sort of around that mid pack there. But Walsh has been like with it. Walsh hasn't gone above his high score was 126. He's only had the 2 scores of over 120. But he's been consistent. He's only had 1 game so far this year below 108, which was a 93, which isn't the end of the world. It's not an absolute killer of your week. But I just think he's just getting the job done, and I think he's a pretty safe, solid option this week. He's probably not going to give you a 140, 150 like some of these other options, but I think there's more chance of him going 120 this week than say like a Butters going 100 this week. Put it like for sure. So
I agree.
I think that
I love that shout.
Yeah, so I do like Walsh as a consistent option this week.
Yeah, the thing that I haven't loved about him, why I haven't picked him as much this year, is like his kick to handball ratio. He handballs so much more than he kicks. Even last week, he had 11 kicks and 17 handballs. The week before, 8 kicks, 21 handballs. So, that's the only thing I don't like. But this week, I am probably going to pick him as well, personally, just for exactly those reasons you gave, in terms of we know what we're going to get from him. He's actually in good form. He's nice and healthy. He's clearly got the role there in Carlton's midfield. So, I'm pretty confident in that pick as well, what it can give us there, mate.
The thing I just like last point on Walsh, the thing I liked as well, 7 marks, 7 tackles last week. I did like those numbers bump up. He hasn't marked it a lot this week, but I think Nick Newman in the side, better ball user there, can get in the ball. I do like that. And then his tackles last 2 weeks have been good. Well, actually, his last 4 weeks, 8, 5, 8, and 7. So it's just good to see him getting some tackles as well to bump up that score.
Exactly. Probably speaks to his fitness too, and like his health too. So I think I love watching Sam Walsh play, and I think if he's doing that, he should definitely be a look in our squads for this week. Max Hansen, g'day mate, he's in the chat, says, I found out about Wash's flaw when I played him in all comps in Gather Round. That is a rough one.
Did he get tagged?
Let's hope if you go there again this week, mate.
Did he get tagged in that? Foss?
Yeah, I think someone...
Foss. No, Foss didn't. No, Simpkin went to him in that game. That's right. That was the reason why. And the other midfielder we didn't touch on, Finn Callahan, gets probably the Finn O'Sullivan tag this week because he's back in. So I think that's probably an avoid as well.
And 100%. Yeah, we haven't mentioned that one. But I haven't looked at a Finn Callahan for exactly that reason. But gee, aren't the rucks interesting this week? We have so many options. We actually have 3 options, Gawn, Jackson and Grundy. We've got 2 pretty genuine pods in your Rowan Marshall and Tristan Cherry, who's coming back from his suspension. And we've got a bonus pod is a Darcy Cameron, purely based on the last 2 weeks of form. And I don't think it is a clear avoid. And pretty much don't look at the rest. That's the way we sort of see it, mate. In terms of 2 rucks, who are you liking in terms of those this week to lock into some of your squads?
For me this week, I think it's Brodie Grundy, Matt Gawn, avoid the rest. I actually think it is genuinely these 2 you lock in and you don't think about it. And the reason I say that, Brodie Grundy tomorrow night is up against an Englishless Western Bulldogs. So they're bringing in Lachlan Smith for his debut, 3rd-year ruck there from the VFL. And they've got Louis Emmett, who's been their sort of number 1 ruck the last couple of weeks, right? So Grundy's got that. I think he went over 140 GDS points against the Bulldogs last year in this matchup against Tim English. And then Max Gawn against Richmond, up against Samson Ryan. I think Gawn is going to monster him. And I think the last three games against Richmond, Gawn has gone over, I think, 150, if I'm not mistaken, GDS points.
Yeah.
So he loves Richmond. He loves the Anzac Eve matchup as well. Always stands up in these ones there. These are the two that I've put as much salary as possible on both of them, and they're both in my side. I think I had a Gawn All-Star and a Platinum Grundy in my classic side. So I absolutely love these two this week, and I think they go absolutely huge.
Great minds think alike, mate. That is the exact ruck rollout with salary that I'm playing too.
All-Star and Platinum? Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And same thinking too. That like those last two, for Gawn against the Tigers there, 151, 154. He scores well with Nank in the side. So having no Toby Nankervis, to go up against. Oh, the other thing is I hope he gets a few more marks this week. He hasn't had many marks recently, and I think it's one across the past two games potentially for Maxi Gawn, and I think. Yep, and won the week before. So I think if he can get some marks, which you would imagine he would, that scoring could go up from what it has been recently.
The fact that he still scored 105 GDS points against Brisbane, who are one of the toughest matchups for rucks, and no marks, he still scored a 105. I think still pretty impressive.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why we're probably playing him this week. Absolutely. And you go Brodie Grundy, 157, 117 and 129 in his last three against the Dogs. And again, Tim English, we know that he does give up points to opposition rucks as is. So if he's out of the side, it's going to be really good to see what those two can put up for us. But can we make a bit of a case for Luke Jackson, the unicorn? He's been in some pretty good form. He's hit scores of 112, 139 and 107. He's always pretty popular amongst GDS coaches for what he can do and how rewarding our scoring system is to players who take marks and kick and get goals, which he does. We obviously saw Mason Cox come into the side as well. The role was a little bit better with Cox in the side if you look at the split of CBAs and ruck contests attended. So it was 70% CBAs and 64% ruck contests attended. So that's pretty good for him. And he's up against the Blues who won't have Mark Pitt in it. So he won't be there. And they're already the third best matchup for opposition rucks. We saw Darcy Cameron. He had a 124 on them last week, and he dominated around the ground and in the air, which we know that's a strength for LJ. So I just want to flag he's had 125 and 101 against them in his last two. He could be one maybe he's more of a pod if everyone's going towards Grundy and a Gawn, for example. But is there any case where you could be tempted into an LJ in another competition you're maybe not prioritising?
Definitely, 100%. If this was any other weekend, Grundy and Gawn didn't have as good a matchups as they did, then Jackson would be a very good option. He's like, as you said, Pitto not going to be there for Carlton this week, so it's going to be up against probably Liam Reedy. A bit of a revenge game there for Liam Reedy as well. But
revenge.
I think Jackson goes well there, and I think definitely a case to be made. It's again, if we could move some spots around, take a couple of midfielders out, put an extra defender, put an extra ruck in, I reckon, and put Jackson in. But yeah, not quite in there for me. But if you don't have question for you, right? If you've got, say, a gold Luke Jackson and or a platinum Jackson, whichever one, and you've got maybe a silver Grundy or Gawn, would you put Jackson in there? Do you think it's a good enough matchup where you go, okay, well, the difference in points might put the Jackson in your side because it's still such a good matchup? Because it's an interesting one.
Bit of a cliche. It's probably squad dependent, right? Yeah. Like it probably looks like, what does the salary look like across the rest of your squad? Are you happy with your salary elsewhere? Can you fit a gold LJ in? Because if it comes down to, I'm happy with my salary everywhere else, and it comes down to this last ruck spot, I have enough to fit a gold in there, I'd be plugging LJ in. I'd be pretty happy with that this week. If I could, maybe bump somebody else up, I was really keen on, like a Zach Merritt could go to a gold to a plat, for example, and it just means you're playing a silver Gawn or a silver Grundy, I'd probably do that. Agreed. It just depends what your squad looks like and if you can fit him in. And maybe you've got an all-star card for an LJ, like I know Dill does from the Fantasy Bros. He's playing classic competition for the first time now, played his first squad last week, and he's got an all-star LJ. So, Dill, roll that out this week, mate, in your classic side. So it is probably squad dependent.
Yeah, agreed with that one.
And Roscoe, you've broken my heart there, mate. Thinks TDK will be named, sadly. Gee, I hope not, because it didn't sound like he was going to be, and that's the sole reason why we put Rowan Marshall there. So flagging that, if TDK's in, do not play Rowan Marshall. Don't go near him.
Yeah,
but if TDK's not there, he's a genuine pod up against the West Coast Eagles, who have always been a pretty good matchup for Rowan Marshall in the past. But if he's playing that second ruck role behind TDK. Like, it's just not something I think we can entertain.
So just
What are your thoughts there,
yeah,
mate?
just to watch on Ron Marshall. So like, even if TDK's named this week, I wouldn't be playing him this week, right? But it's a watch for me because I watched Marshall closely last week, and the reason I did, I noticed him actually lining up on a wing a number of times. So what actually happened in the first half before TDK got injured was TDK would take the centre bounces or centre ball ups. I still say centre bounces. I don't know about you, but he'd take the centre ball ups. And as soon as that happened, Marshall would actually be the ruck around the ground. And I think it actually worked for St Kilda a lot better because TDK hasn't had that same effect around the ground. So I just wonder moving forward if they're going to play both, which I'm assuming they will. TDK takes centre bounces, moves a bit more to the forward 50 stoppages and forward. And then Marshall is like the extra midfield around the ground because he was quite influential, I thought, Marshall last week throughout the game. So just a watch. And maybe next year we could even have him available as a forward in GDS, which would be huge. So yeah, just a watch on Marshall. But yeah.
Yeah, we'd obviously lose Sheasel next year from our forward line, and we could pick up a Rowan Marshall. That'd be handy, especially if he could find a number one rucker spot somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I that's a really good point. Definitely going to watch that personally myself this week. And if a TDK isn't there, just so viewers and listeners are aware, in his last year, Romar had 186 on the West Coast Eagles in round 10. And he had 143 and 119 the year before. So he could be absolutely huge if he gets this number one ruck spot if TDK is not there. And I think from a footy narrative perspective, wouldn't Romar love to have just a free run at the ruck to show what he can do against the matchup that he's dominated in the past? But just, keep an eye on that for teams if TDK is there, I think is the takeaway. And a Tristan Sherry, I think he'll also be hungry as well coming back. I just wanted to flag that. Not sure if we should go there in a standard competition, but he's definitely going to be a play in our Sunday competition. 100%. And maybe if TDK comes in, maybe it's Tristan Sherry, who's our Sunday superstar. Up against the Giants, and in particular without Kieran Briggs, it's going to be a Nick Madden, who's their number one man. He's got a current season high of 168, which was against the Eagles in round 2. And even before that, he was tracking pretty well. He had a 104 in round 1. And even that game where he got suspended, that brain fade game against the Bombers, he was tracking well at half time. So I think him coming back in, if you want another bit of a point of difference, or if you don't have some Grundy and Gawn cards, I think, he could be a potential play coming back for the Kangaroos.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, something to watch. The other thing I was just watching with this matchup, right, is that for the Giants, Lekalia last week actually took the centre bounces with the hitouts, and he got over the top of Brodie Grundy, obviously, because he's such a good jumper. Something to watch this week. Could affect Tristan Cherry at the centre bounces, but I think outside that, I think you'll be fine. And it's probably just something to watch as well, just in these other games. It seems like teams are moving a bit more towards who's their best jumper for centre bounces, and then their other ruck will just come in. Like St Kilda did it a bit last week with TDK and Marshall. Collingwood have done it now for the past couple of weeks since Darcy Cameron's been in good form. Like he's the one that you said at the bonus pod. Gold Coast as well. Another
Gold
team,
Coast,
Mac Andrew. So I just wonder, like, the team's going to do that with the rule change. They've maybe figured out that way is that, like, I think Steen was taking the centre bounces and then Darcy Cameron rucks and Steen goes forward there. So, I think that's a big watch with these rucks moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably feeds in nicely to that Darcy Cameron play there too. 25% CBAs, but he just looks so good around the ground, which speaks to that role you just mentioned. Still takes 60 to 61% of those ruck contests in those past 2 weeks. And he's had scores of 124 and 123. So up against the Bombers in the Anzac Day clash, I think, he could be one again. If you're looking for something a little bit different, I'm not going to go there personally, but his form's been really good. And I just want to shout out the big fella because I really like him. I've got him in a keeper league and give him a bit of love because if Steen potentially is not there in the coming weeks for whatever reason or at some stage this year, he's definitely one that's going to fly back onto our radars, I'd imagine.
For sure.
All right, mate. Looking at our forwards, we'll round up our line previews for round 7. We've got some players there on screen. Obviously, our plug and plays. We've got Harry Sheasel, Cozzy Pickett, Flanders. We've kept Josh Rochelle in there. His role's still the same. He's 84 last week is not ideal, obviously. Probably not taking him out just yet, given how good his start to the season has been and his role. You're probably better to comment on this, mate, but I don't think his role's changed from what I've seen. I think he's right to stay in there, and Christian Petrarca's pretty solid too in terms of an option you can be confident in most weeks. This is probably the one week where you might not like him as much, but I think he's still a bit of a play. What's your thought on Rochelle there, staying in our plug and play? Should we get rid of him?
No, he's still in for me. Like his role was still like obviously with Dawson not being there, he's pretty much been the number one mid. I think he had the most CBAs on the ground last week of any midfielder. Only McAndrew had more. McAndrew had the 26 and Rochelle had the 25. So if you're looking at in terms of percentage there was what 30. I think there was 31 CBAs last week. So I'm just quickly working that out there. What the percentage was? That was about 81%. So like still very good number one midfielder. I think it will continue even with Dawson back whenever that may be. So yeah, he's regards the matchup. I think he's just got a safe floor. I think last week lower one. I think he responds a little bit this week.
Yeah, I agree. I think when he's playing so well, it's hard for them to change it up right in that midfield. So, yeah, I like him. I'm keen to keep him in there as well. But it was just good to get your insight there too, because I know some coaches might be looking against him this week up against the Lions.
There's some good pods and some good options as well outside of that. But just on Petrarca, you mentioned as well. I think obviously Butters and Horn France went pretty well last week against Hawks. So I'm hoping that Petrarca can do something similar to what Horn Francis did last week.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of that matchup quickly too, I didn't mention this before. Matty Rao as a midfielder up against the Hawks there. We didn't flag him as an option in the midfield.
That's a sneaky one.
Have you thought about a Matty Rao?
I didn't until now. Until you mentioned it, I didn't. Because he probably doesn't come up because the low score, so his average is low. So yeah, that's an interesting one against the Hawks. Probably think that maybe Nash probably matches up with All Newcomb and they try and quell him because Anderson. I don't know if Anderson's going to be there or not. So it's one to consider though, for sure.
It is. I'll roll him out in Challenger, but just was one where I was tossing up. Should I put him in a classic competition as well? I'm not quite sure, and I'm never confident picking players when they're playing down in Tassie either. It's one that scares me a little bit. So it's I thought I'd mention that, just bringing up that Hawks match up there too, mate. But tell you what, who is an option, and he's getting close towards that plug and play given his role, is Justin McInerney. He's had an incredible start to the season, obviously in that midfield role for the Swans there. And I think he's going to be one that we put in pretty quickly to our squads this week, given the fact we've got Brian Myers, who won't be available, confirmed ACL for him. So don't be picking a Brian Myers this week. The other one we haven't got mentioned on screen is the Sam Darcy. He's also done his ACL too. So two very popular forward picks amongst the GDS coaches and two All-Stars from our 2025 collection. We're having to look at a few other players to fill out these forward lines. And I think Justin McInerney is just screaming in terms of what he has done this year to be in our sides. He's got a ceiling score of 145. He had 112 last week. He's just been super consistent, averaging 112.6 for the season there. So I'm liking him in my forward line this week. Mate, is he a lock there for you?
He is. Yep. He's in there, and even with Heaney out, that's probably might even get a boost, right? With no Heaney there. So for me, I'll probably have him in the plug and plays moving forward. He's just been super consistent since Errol's been out. He's been the guy that's been in the midfield there as well. And just on the injuries, it's so cruel sometimes this game, right? Like Darcy, ACL. I'm hoping the Grind Myers is just a strained ACL, and it's like a couple of months on the sidelines. He's back towards the end of the year, but yeah, it's brutal when these guys go out, particularly when they're as serious as an ACL or an Achilles or something.
Yeah, fingers crossed, absolutely, and especially at Sam Darcy, Brian Myers too, but definitely a Sam Darcy where, we speak about the unicorn before, Luke Jackson. I think Sam Darcy sort of fits into that mold there too. He's a really special player, and we just want to see him play. So it is disappointing. But for McInerney, Dogs are the fourth easiest matchup that he's played against across his career. He's had scores of 86 and 107 in his last two, and that's probably not in that midfield role he's currently got. And interesting, Heaney being out, like you mentioned, his CBAs, and this is not Heaney, sorry, this is Justin McInerney. His CBAs dipped last week to 55% from 78% the week before, with the return of Angus Sheldrick to the side. So with an Isaac Heaney going out, you'd imagine that it's not going to be 55% again this week. It's probably going to go back up. Yeah. So, I think he's one we're playing in our sides for sure. And speaking of plug and plays or players who are just not knocking the door down, kicking the door down, Bradley Hill. Should he be in there too? Because he's the forgotten man in the forward line this season. He's quietly averaging 108.8. And we spoke about the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown, mate. I have booked a place in the playoff series for myself, and it was off the back of it was off the back of a Cal Wilkie, but it was also off the back of a Bradley Hill in the forward line as a bit of a pod. So he's one. Could we be considering a Bradley Hill in our forward lines this week?
Yeah, you can for sure. Great matchup. He's I'm just trying to get up his scores. I just want to see what his lower score is because it seems like his floor has been quite high this year. Like he's been able to put up consistent scores pretty much week on week. So have you got this?
95.
Yeah, so that's what you're looking
Yeah.
for, right? So I think he's definitely an option. I'm not sure if I've got a Brad Hill in my club, which is surprising, but if I do, he's definitely going to be in my Sunday Showdown team. He's definitely an option for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, why not? Like he's 90. If you're getting a floor of
Yeah.
95 from your forwards, you got to put him in. He's probably a bit like Ashcroft though. He can just drop a 60 out of nowhere. So, but West Coast,
Yeah.
great matchup.
Correct. And the difference there with Will Ashcroft and Brad Hill is that they both can drop a floor score, but we've seen it from Will Ashcroft this year. We haven't seen it from Brad Hill. So I think that's the thing that I'm sort of liking. It's his role, which is really good. He's got 20 or more disposals in every game this season, and he's got a really high kick to handball ratio. We said the opposite about a Sam Walsh, where we're still keen on him for his consistency, but Brad Hill's got a really high kick to handball ratio, and he takes marks too because he works on the outside of the contest really well. And we know it's probably St Kilda too, right? It's probably their fantasy game that's really conducive to these high scores. So I'm pretty again, I can't say I'm confident too much after last week, but he's one player that I'm pretty confident if we're picking him in our forward lines where we should be getting a pretty good score. So I do really like a Brad Hill this week. Is a Jezza in your team kicking 10 last week, coming up against the Power this week? What are you thinking?
Pretty nice matchup again for Jezza.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I've always had this in like whether it be like cricket fantasy or Aussie rules fantasy or anything like that. Once players a big game like that, they don't normally follow it up with another big ceiling score. I don't know if you've ever had that, but I always normally go if they've had a big ceiling score, unless you're like a Tom Rockcliffe, Tom Mitchell, Dane Swan, someone like that, like one of the pigs in fantasy. I probably don't think you're going to back it up again. I could be very wrong, and he could go for 10 again.
Archie
Yeah,
Roberts.
Archie Roberts, yeah, is one. I know players definitely back it up for sure, but the great matchup for sure. And I do like Jezza
Yeah.
as an option as well. I have got him in a couple of squads this week. Probably not my main classic side, but I've got him sort of floating around in some like the challenger and champion and stuff like that. So I do like him.
Yeah.
He's got the ceiling, right? So if you're looking for a ceiling score, he's the one.
Exactly. And he's had, in his last two games against the Power, he's kicked a total of 13 goals. And, his previous scores against the Power, he's had 102, 139, 115, 95. So he's been pretty solid and he's hit a bit of form. The thing that scares me too is just how many coaches are playing a Jeremy Cameron every week. Like he's one of the highest played forwards across the GameDay Squad platform. So that's the other thing that scares me. I'm not really too sure I want to go against it again because it burnt me last
The
week.
one that
He's currently, where is he? Top 7. So he's sitting as the sixth most
Yeah,
popular.
right. That's quite high. I didn't expect to be as high as what it was. But I guess the one flag with the matchup this week is if people remember back to the matchup last year against Port. I just want to get up here because Port had a lot of those defender injuries. That was like the game where there was like 4 hamstring injuries in like the first quarter and a half. It was like everyone was going down. It was one of the craziest things I've seen. But Lockie Jones was playing on Jeremy Cameron to start that game. And I think Jeremy Cameron, I don't think he scored a goal in the first half. I'm just checking. No, he kicked 2. So he kicked 2 in the second quarter. I believe one of them was after the injury. But after that happened, that's when Jez, I think, kicked 5 goals in the last quarter. So he went absolutely off once Jones went off. So I wonder if they go that matchup again. Maybe is that quite an down?
Yeah.
They seem to match up quite well when they've played. So just something I just remember from that last game. I might be completely off the mark there, but just something I'll be watching.
Yeah, no, it's a good shout. I think for me, I'll be looking at those teams as well, but probably just looking at what their key defensive stocks look like for this weekend. For me, and I has mentioned this too. He's got this in the notes. He said it absolutely burnt him last week not playing a Jezza, and watching him kick that bag and pile on 10 goals is one of the hardest things you can watch in fantasy footy. So we're not too keen to be not playing a Jezza this week. I think we'll look to play him where we can. And obviously given that form against the Power too, he should be a good shout, that is for sure. And shout out to Arnie Booger, who I know loves the Jeremy Cameron. But if you want a really spicy pod, probably the good pod play there is a Murphy Reed. You said he's probably the Freo Docker that you're most keen on this year at the moment when picking across fantasy competitions. Would you be tempted in someone who could be a bit spicier though? Cam Zurhaar flagging that role change last week. I nearly threw my phone at the wall given how the round went last week and the fact that Colby was then starting on a half forward flank. But Cam Zurhaar was the one that went back and played very well too. So he had a great score there last week. against against the Tigers there, wasn't it? So I think he's one flagging the role change. I'm not going to go there. I think that's a bit too spicy for me, but it's just flagging that too, particularly for the Sunday competition as well. He might be someone you look at putting someone in your forward line.
Yeah. I think that the Sunday Showdown is probably where I'd look to play him. Who would have thought? I did not think when I came on with you for the first time a couple of weeks ago that at any point this year you boys would be talking about Cam Zurhaar. But here we are in Fantasy 2026. We're talking about Cam Zurhaar. Like, the Giants matchup for me is probably what turns me off of jumping onto a Cam Zurhaar this week. I like that from Ross Diamond. Zurhaar locked into Challenger. And why not? If you've got a diamond, chuck it in there. He could go big in because he was great last week. His scoring was great. I don't like the move because I love Colby, and I think Colby's best position is off halfback. I don't love how they're every second week he's forward, he's midfield, he's halfback. It's like just settle Colby down in one. I don't reckon anyone has been moved around more in the AFL in the past probably 2 years than Colby McKercher. It's quite ridiculous. But Zurhaar's in the role. I just think that it's maybe a quarter away, an injury away, a lack of goals in a quarter away from Zurhaar moving forward. So that's probably why I'm just a bit nervous to play him. But if you want a pod, why not? Why not? He's good last week.
Yeah, and I think if we're ever going to talk about Cam Zurhaar on this pod, and if you're ever going to pull the trigger on a Cam Zurhaar, it's this week.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
It is a short-term play. There's no certainty to this role, like you said. Coming off 131 last week, he had 23 touches, 11 marks, 4 tackles, and looked really good. North won. So you can be pretty confident that's the role he's going to be in to at least start this game this week. But yeah, like you said, there could be a chance something happens during the game where it's not quite going their way and they need to flip the magnets around, which we know Clarko does. So yeah, just flagging that role change there for our coaches. But is a Murphy Reed in your side there, the other pod we've got on screen? Has he found a way into a standard comp for you?
Is he in Challenger for me? I'm just having a quick look if I put him in Challenger. He's in the mix. No, he's not currently in Challenger for me at the moment, because I pretty much go classic as the main comp, and then like all the special ones like Prime Time, Sunday Showdown, under 22. So he's in a couple of those. Not quite at the moment, but he's a good option. He's bloody good footballer. So I do like him as well. Absolutely. One other pod that's not on the screen that I don't mind, want to get your thoughts on, Jack Ross.
Yep.
He went big last week and had a big score. Taranto concussion out this week. Probably not going to get any attention. I've actually been tossing up Jezza versus Jack Ross as my 7th forward on the bench. So what are your thoughts on a bit of Jack Ross?
Yep. No, I like it. He was one that we were talking about as a potential point of difference. So we had Murphy Reed, Zurhaar, and we had Jack Ross. Jack Ross was in there initially. And then we just sort of thought, again, like a Cam Zurhaar, when are we going to talk about a Cam Zurhaar? So we thought it's probably got to be him that we talk about. And yeah, with that midfield role, like you said, Taranto out, he won't be there. There's space there in the midfield, and he looked so good last week as well. Up against the Demons this week, who are a positive matchup for mids. I think he's a genuine shout. I'm not sure if I'll go there personally myself. Definitely not in a classic, but in another competition, I might look to play him as that 7th forward for sure. I really like that shout this week. Given the matchup, given the role, all the stars seem to be aligning, and he's in some form. So yeah, I love it. I think it's a great shout.
Yeah, I had Ross in there, but I have put Jezza in there just because of the obviously GDS with the 8 points per goal, like just the upside there. I think I've gone there instead, but I've got Ross, particularly in the primetime matchup, and I do like him this week if you want to go there as a pod.
Yeah, absolutely. 50% CBAs last week, and I think that maybe even gets a bit of a bump potentially this week with those changes. Yeah. We'll have to see. You would think so, given what he did last week. So absolutely, we always like those midfielders, or those forwards we're selecting who play through the midfield. One to avoid potentially as well, Shea Bolton, who is up and down and hard to predict at times. He's had 3 weeks under 85 GDS points on the trot for Bolton. That's 79, 83, 81. And, he's had more than 50% CBAs each game during that stretch. But that comes after his back-to-back scores of 128 and 129. So he's one that's really hard to predict. We know that Hayden Young has come into that side there as well, who sort of changes that a bit. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens there in terms of his time around the footy. It's probably going to drop a fair bit. And his last 3 games against the Blues have been 57, 68, 74. It's just not amazing. And again, the role's not looking very good with Hayden Young coming back into that side. So he's one we're probably keen to avoid this week, just personally. Other options potentially Zach Bailey, Isaac Rankin, Sean Manor. There are probably some other names coaches would be looking at. But otherwise, mate, I think they're our picks. Have you got any closing thoughts there on the forwards?
Sean Manor was the one that, I didn't mind that you just listed there as well. Grind Myers being out probably means he's got a bit more responsibility as that high half forward that could get right at the ground. Yep. So it could be a bit of a shout. And yeah, I think Bolton is like you. We're speaking about how Cozzy last year was that midfielder that went forward. I think Bolton is a little bit of that. He's not really a midfielder that does follow around. And with Hayden Young in there muddying the waters, I think it's for Brayshaw not a good thing. I also think Bolton's a little bit affected by that one. I just want to have a look. Did Manor have like a really big game against Port Adelaide last year, like a 140, 150? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was against someone else. I just thought he had a big game. No, maybe not. Yeah. Okay, maybe it's just another game. But I think it's a decent matchup for him this week still.
Yeah, that's it. Be interesting to see if coaches go there. I think he's a quality player, so you can easily look at him. It's just funny he's had a bit of a down start to the year. But just another name to throw out for us there, mate. But closing out the episode, we'll whip through these last few things really quickly. These are the current contender sides that we're lining up with. And again, Harry has throws a few pods in this one. I go a bit more standard or classic, and I'll throw a pod here or there. But you can see in our backline, mate, couple Giants. We've got a couple Saints there, and obviously an Archie Roberts there. Plus, Haz is going to throw his pod there in a Nick Blakey, and I'm going to go with Josh Dacos. In terms of the midfield there, pretty stock standard there, what we're running with. And the thing that we'll have to change is Isaac Heaney has to come out, because we haven't had a chance to change these since that news dropped late this afternoon, or this evening, I should say, when teams got released. So Heaney's going to have to come out for us. And we'll have to look at who goes in. It's probably a Sam Walsh potentially, unless I'm going to throw a pod in there, or a second pod, I should say, because I've got Will Ashcroft on the bench, and so does Haz. Gawn and Grundy, very hard to go past those two there in the ruck line, like we spoke about. And our forward line, I think that's pretty standard. We like a Murphy Reid pod there in our contender side, but Murphy Reid, he probably won't feature in my classic side there. So just trying to share some of those picks we've had across three squads, being contender, classic, and challenger. Have you got any thoughts with those sides there, mate?
Yeah, looking good. A lot of picks are similar to me as well. A couple of different, obviously. There, I was actually going to screen share my squad to show, but I actually did look earlier, and I'm still in the GDS Cup, so I'm in the round of 16. So I probably want to keep my classic side close to my chest, just because it's round of 16. We're getting to the crunch time. I haven't been able to win or get close. Like I got close to winning the Indian Cricket Cup or whatever, but a shout out to Prison Mike. Went down to him a couple of nights ago in the semi-final. So I'm still hunting for a GDS Cup across a couple of any competition. So yeah, big week this week. So good luck to is it Sloth Kings, I think, as well, up against this week. So it should be a good matchup.
Yeah, Sloth Kings. Yeah, he knocked off Haz. He's in good form, so best of luck to you, mate. And as I said, you can share your classic side if you want, but you don't have to. Keep your secrets. And mate, here's our consensus primetime team. It's probably less consensus and probably more the side I put together this afternoon. And I said to Haz, "What do you reckon?" And he says, "Yep, looks pretty good to me."
Diamonds there.
I'm basically trying to play the cards that I have. I filter by the team, and I go, "Yep." And it just turns out these 14s I have a fair few diamonds for. So I've thrown them in, and I have some pretty handy Grundy and Gawn stocks too. I picked up that Maxi Gawn on the trade market for $25 a few weeks ago, believe it or not. And he's been a very handy pickup there. So he's going to get a run in prime time this week, and packed a Brody Grundy a few weeks ago too. So been very lucky there with that. And a few of the others I sort of have packed along my journey. But yeah, in the back line, we've got Blakey, Mills, and Bice. I'm going to sort of load up on three swans there. I have a Bailey Williams and a Bailey Dale. So Bailey Dale had a bit of, I don't know if it's a role change so much, but he had a really good game last week, taking a fair few kick-ins against the Cats.
11.
Yeah, 11 kick-ins, which is good. Love to see Bailey Dale get back into a bit of form. So he'll roll out there. And otherwise, I've just gone for a few names. So Isaac Heaney, Silver Isaac Heaney on the bench. He'll have to come out. Somebody else will replace him. That's a bit of the side I'm looking for. You'll notice a Jack Ross in the forward line there, mate. He gets a run around. I have to look at my other squads and see if he can get a game there too. But there's just a few forward options this week that I like.
Yeah, no, agreed. I like that squad.
Lovely. And again, just a shout out there to Stats Lab as well. Yeah, they have some unreal data thanks to their ongoing support for us. And just make sure you head to the statslab.app and check out all the awesome tools they have available. It's player stats from every game, matchup strength, player comparisons, and heaps of analysis tools to help you dominate game day squad. So get amongst them if you haven't already, of course. And mate, BroDown Showdown, I got up again. It was 4-2, so the score will have to be updated. But we went for the point of difference edition last week. So we had to pick pods less than 10% played across comps. Except the Bodie, Ewan, and Lawson Humphreys. That was our utility spot where they had to be less than 5% played. So it was a really cool competition last week, picking the different players. So we had Kitty Coleman up against Nick Newman, and Nick Newman took that thanks to his first half before he kicked the feet up in the second. Matty Rao took the win against Hugh McCluggage with a 119 against his 82. And obviously Lawson Humphreys, who was that pod we shouted in the back line there, hit a 130 compared to Ewan's 103. So pretty good scores, and Simpkin got up to against a Josh Tracy, which takes my lead.
That's just bringing nightmares. I forgot. We said about our stars and scars. I forgot. Yeah, I had Tracy in my main squad as a pod on the bench against West Coast. So that score counted for me because of the Bont one didn't. So yeah, no, I feel your pain, mate.
It was a rough week, wasn't it? And these were the coaches who backed me in. Coach Stephen, Janeth, Mel's, Maxi, Rossonero, Roscoe, Cricket Academy, and Max Hansen. So I'm going to spin that wheel. You can see that all right there, mate?
Yep, I can see that. How good. Always love spinning the wheel.
Let's see who gets it. It's going to be Maxi there. He's taken out a couple so far now. Well done, Maxi, getting involved as well. He's on all the shows that we do there for Game Day Squad. He gets involved. So thank you very much, mate, for doing that. And let's have a look here. We have a 9-player common all-star pack we're going to open. Can you see the pack on screen there, Bales?
Yep. Yeah, I can see that.
Let's see what we've got.
Nothing
no all-stars left,
though. Opening packs.
Absolutely. Oh, no, we're going to freeze here. We might have to wait and see how we go there with that. Oh, that might not be good. Maxi, I'll have to figure out potentially what's in this pack as we go. Haven't had issues with the pack openings so far this year.
If it's not going to open it the way you only can check it is you go, what is it, club, and then go listed, and then it's like the first 9 cards come up. So we might have a bit of suspense. We might have to look at Pitty's club. Might have to have a bit of a peek behind the curtain, and then we can see what is his club, and then we can see what's been packed.
We'll see how we go. I might even try and just go back to that BroDown Showdown, and I'll jump over there quickly, and I'll refresh that screen too while we're doing that. So if we jump across there and have a look at this next week in terms of our BroDown Showdown, we're going to go to the 2025 Draft Class Edition. So that there, we can see on screen, it's going to be Jacob Farrow up against Josh Lindsay for me. It's going to be Willem Dersma for Haz up against Sam Grill for me. And then Zeke Euland up against Sullivan Roby as that utility spot there. So who are you liking there, mate, in terms of the BroDown Showdown?
Sorry, mate. No, I'm on with you, but I am liking Haz's 3. I think obviously Durs has been fantastic to start his career, and Jacob Farrow's got that prime role up against Collingwood, who have got there. So yeah, and I guess that you'll and say Roby's probably going to be close, but wouldn't shock me though. Lindsay's got a good matchup against the Saints and Grill. Maybe with Banks out, does he go to half back? Does he get a bit more ball back there? I do worry with his low tog last couple of weeks. I wonder if they're just managing him through. But the good thing is, I do like how you guys do this different themes each week for the BroDown Showdown. So I like it. It's good. It honestly could go either way, but I think I'll just go Haz. Sorry, mate.
Yeah. I won't hold it against you there, Bales, of course. But get your comments in the chat now, guys.
And now you're saying,
who do you reckon is going to get up?
Now you're thinking, all right, this last time Bales is coming on with me on the pod. So.
Just make a note of that now, just so I don't forget. All right, let's see how we go here. Let's hope we get a little bit of luck.
Here we go. What are we going to get?
All righty, now Bales, can you pick a row for Maxi? Is he going to have the top, middle, or bottom?
Is Maxi in the chat with us, or is he not with us tonight?
I haven't seen him in there, not tonight.
I was going to say if you wanted to put in the chat what row he wanted, I could have just gone with that one. But I'll go the middle row if Maxi's not in the chat.
Alrighty, let's see how we go. What has he got there? So he's got gold, silver. So we have a silver Bo Allen, so he'll be under 22 eligible there for him. Gold Jacob Hopper, and a gold Dan Butler. So there for Maxi there.
Sorry, Maxi.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Let's see what else we've got in this pack there for us. So silver's everywhere else. So he's packed the 2 golds. So we have Hannaford, Hoffman, Rioli, and then a Nick Blakey, Young, and a Mark Blitzarves there as well. So the Blakey could be handy as
Didn't miss too
well.
much there, Maxi, so it makes me feel a tiny bit better.
Like it wasn't like a Dacos or a Smith or someone like that too.
Yeah.
That's where it stings a bit. Alrighty. Now, mate, we'll jump back over and we'll wrap up this episode as well. Thanks for everyone jumping in. Just make sure you get your comment in now. Who you reckon is going to take out the next round? I'm up to 5-2, so I'm pretty confident with how I'm going there. So Arnie Booger, sorry, saw Pitty in the corner. Maxi Hansen, he's going for Haz. And we obviously know that Bales, you're going to go for Haz as well. And yeah, Roscoe thinks Haz may have it this week. Really feel like Farrow and Willem can get up. So love those shouts. Again, we love the BroDown Showdown because it is interesting. We've got different themes we're going to run with each week. And we're tossing the idea up of potentially doing the Fantasy Bros, for example, potentially up against Supercoach Swordplay one week, and the Fantasy Bros up against Bales, yourself there at the Fantasy Fanatics, like do a bit of a cross-platform type thing. That would be really, really cool because it's a bit of fun there too. Any closing thoughts just quickly there, mate?
No, it's been a pleasure to jump on once again and chat some GDS, mate. So thanks for the invite. Looking forward to another big round of footy. I love Thursday night footy because it means the weeks are shorter and we get footy. It's only a couple of days between rounds, which is great. So looking forward to it start kicking off tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's right. And mate, thanks so much for coming on. We love your time as always. It really helps us out. Your insights are second to none. So we love your analysis there, mate, and always appreciate your time. And obviously, best of luck in the cup this week for you.
Thank you, mate.
Going
yes,
through. I'm not
nervous
jealous at all, mate.
Yeah, nervous with this one. It's because like footy's obviously the main fantasy sport I play, and I haven't been lucky enough to get this far in the Aussie Rules Cup competition. So yeah, it's a nervous week. So Sloth Kings, good luck. And should be a good matchup.
Absolutely. And thanks to everyone for getting the chat there as well. We appreciate you guys and your support every single week. For our new users, just make sure you've used that code FBAS26 when signing up to GameDay Squad to get yourself those 3 9-player common packs, get your GameDay Squad journey started, get ripped into that Contender competition, which is unreal. And again, Bales, thank you so much for joining us there, mate. Our next show is going to be previewing round 8 live. That is next Wednesday, the 29th of April, and we will see you there. Thanks, Bales. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.